Hello and welcome to the Diversity Project's annual event Bake-Along session. I'm Lewis Wilkes and I'm an Associate Director at Lansons. We started Bake-Along sessions at the height of lockdown as a fun way for colleagues to kind of come together and do something fun and learn a new skill. So what I'm going to be sharing with you today is one of the most popular recipes we did during that time. It's the Basque cheesecake. Now the thing that's great about this cheesecake is it kind of breaks all the rules of cheesecake. Usually you have to be really careful not to cook it too high or try and avoid cracks. But the beauty of the Basque cheesecake, which was originated in the San Sebastian region of Spain, is that it really depends on the idea of you cooking at a really high temperature, allowing it to crack, allowing it to kind of collapse in on itself as it cools. And it really develops this like amazing, beautiful, fluffy cheesecake that is something really impressive. You can serve it at a family meal or just kind of keep it in the fridge for a few days and kind of snack on it as you go along. So yeah, we're going to be going through that today, and I'm going to, in real time, as you can see, we're in my very lo-fi kitchen here, just to kind of take you through how to do it. Should take about 45 minutes, and then it'll be baking in the oven for an hour. So, and you'll see I'll be referring to my notes throughout. First few things we need to do is kind of put a rack in the middle shelf of your oven and put it on 200 degrees for a fan oven, about 210 if you're working with a conventional oven. Okay, and what we need to do first is we need to prep our pan. So I'm using a 9-inch, I think it's about 23 centimeters pan. And as you can see, you might be looking at the way I've lined this pan and think he's made a bit of a pig's ear of that. This is entirely intentional. So first you've got to do is you want to kind of just butter and grease the pan slightly, just a small amount of butter, wipe it round, and then take two fairly large sheets of parchment paper and layer them over each other. And as you can see, I've got a huge amount of height there on the paper. That's because this cake really puffs up. There's a huge amount of eggs in it. It will really puff up. And you want it to kind of like get into these ridges and into these pleats. So if it's a bit messy, that actually works in favour. It really helps the cake develop over time. Now, I'm sure some of you, if you're going along with this in real time, have looked at the recipe list and you might be a bit alarmed by some of the volumes of cream cheese and cream and sugar. Unfortunately, as a lot of the people who did the bake-along sessions with me throughout lockdown found, one of the sad things about learning to bake is that you really over time do learn just how unhealthy the certain ingredients can be in your baking. But I assure you this calorie bomb is really worth it, and hopefully we'll get something really fantastic out of it. So when you've lined your thing, your tin, what I want you to do is take whatever mixing bowl you're using. Now I'm using, as you can see in the back, a stand mixer, but there's really no need for you to do that. If you have one, that's great. You can use a normal electric hand mixer or even a whisk if you're willing to put a bit of elbow grease into it. And what I've done is I've taken this and I've put 900 grams of cream cheese in there. Yes, you do need the full 900 grams. However, as you see in the recipe I sent around, this gives you quite a large cake. This will kind of be very much this size. If you wanted to use a smaller tin, you could kind of reduce the ingredients, but this is my preferred method and what I would advise you to do. So you're going to take that 900 grams of cream cheese, and then what you're going to do is add to it 300 grams of fine white sugar. So in this case, I'm using caster sugar. You can use granulated sugar. You might just need to beat it and mix it for slightly longer, because what we're aiming for after we do this is kind of for all of the sugar to be dissolved, all of the lumps to kind of be out of the mixture, and really for it to feel like it's kind of dissolved into the cream cheese. So I'm going to add my 300 grams of caster sugar. I'm going to place this in my stand mixer. Again, just use your hand mixer if that's all you have. And I'm going to put that on a kind of medium-low setting. So whatever you're using, just kind of stay below the kind of halfway mark. And I find with this recipe, it's really good if you can kind of weigh out all your ingredients in advance. It might need a bit more washing up or stuff in the dishwasher afterwards, but it really does help the kind of whole thing seem a little bit more seamless and less difficult as you go. Now, what you'll notice as you kind of blend together your cream cheese and your sugar is that naturally the the contents will kind of creep up the sides of the bowl. And what's really important, I think, to make sure you're getting the most out of this is that intermittently, and this will be true throughout the whole of the mixing process for this recipe, you want to scrape the sides down. You can use a kind of palette spatula, anything you have. I like a good old-fashioned wooden spoon. Just keeping an eye on that. It mixes. And all in all, I would say you're probably going to be mixing for about 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes for this first stage. As I said, make sure you're scraping down your sides. And what you can do, and just to let you know, and as you all should, I haven't washed my hands for this, you should just test the thing and rub it between your thumb and forefinger to see if there's any grittiness, because that will tell you whether the sugar has fully dissolved, in which this case it has. So we're fine to move on to the next stage of what we're doing. Okay, so the next part is when we're going to add our eggs to our mixture. So again, don't be frightened by the volumes here. It all is in service of giving you a wonderful cake. We're using 6 full eggs. But it's really, really important, in order to get the desired effect, to get the desired mixture, that you're adding these one by one and allowing them to combine completely with the existing recipe. So not enough to just put 6 eggs in at once. So what we'll do is we'll crack it in. And also a little tip here, a lot of people know, there's a natural kind of tendency for people to crack an egg on the edge of a surface, you know, on the ridge, and that is the #1 way that people end up with shell in whatever they're working with. So what's really, really good, and a good tip that I picked up, is you should always crack eggs on a flat surface. And that's 1 in there. As I said, we're just going to, on a slightly higher speed, allow that egg to fully combine. And we'll do that 6 times with the eggs that we have. So just while we're doing this, I can tell you a little bit about this. As I said, it's a Basque cheesecake. It's from the San Sebastian region of Spain, so the Basque region. And what's really, really fascinating about this is that it was developed in a bar called La Viña. It's now famous for this cheesecake and for their unique way of doing it. It's very different to kind of the New York style cheesecake. And it's become so popular that the owner has talked about the fact that he often gets offers of investment, asking people to kind of, if they can invest in his recipe, because it has become a bit of a viral trend, this style of cheesecake. Mainly, as I said, because it's so easy. It doesn't really require any kind of expert baking knowledge or expert baking skill. It kind of just requires an oven and a bit of patience. So that's my 6th egg gone into the mixture. And you'll notice that as the eggs are combining, you're getting a kind of shinier mixture, very, very silky looking, which is what we're aiming for. Okay, and so what you're looking now at, what you should be expecting to see, is a kind of batter. Again, all important, make sure you're scraping down the sides, just so you're getting the most out of everything. There's no food waste, because we will need all of this to make our wonderful cake. Okay, so what we're now going to do is, on a lower mixer speed, add the rest of our ingredients. So first we're going to add 480 millilitres of cream. Now you might be thinking, wow, my bowl is getting quite high here. You do need a very big mixing bowl to make sure that you're doing this correctly, because it's quite a large volume of liquid, but don't panic, it's all part of the process. You also want to use a teaspoon of vanilla extract. I'm using vanilla bean paste in this case, but you can just use your standard bakery aisle vanilla extract, and you want about a teaspoon. I'm going to eyeball it, but yeah, just a teaspoon if you're measuring it. And also, what we're adding at this stage is a very generous pinch, I'd say, and what I say is that chef's pinch, like a free-fingered pinch of salt. A lot of people kind of who aren't familiar with baking kind of balk at this. They're like, why would you add salt? It's a sweet thing. But really, in anything you do that's sweet, you really, really want to add a certain element of salt to balance the flavours, to make sure you're really bringing out the nice savoury elements of the cake as well as the sweet elements, because as you saw at the beginning, we added a lot of sugar to this. There's a lot of cream in there, and this is going to help us keep it balanced. So again, on a kind of medium-low a medium-low setting, we're just going to combine those extra ingredients, the cream, the vanilla extract, and the salt, until again, we've got a fully combined mixture. And you might be worried at this stage, this looks quite sloppy, it's basically a liquid at this point, how is it going to end up being a lovely cake? Well, obviously we're going to add a little bit of flour to bind it, and also the baking process will kind of bring that together. What's really wonderful about this is, unlike a traditional cheesecake, where you have a kind of crust, like a New York style cheesecake, this kind of develops its own crust through the kind of slightly burned process that you go through. And that's one thing I'll say as you're baking it as well. You might be worried about the colour. It's like, is that too dark? No, that's all part of the process. You want it to kind of develop that really, really dark texture on the outside, and the inside you'll have this like really fluffy, light cheesecake. Okay, so that looks pretty combined there. Again, we're looking like quite a lot of liquid at this stage. A kind of silky mixture is what we're kind of aiming for. So, what we're going to need to do now, and I'm going to take this out just to do this part of the process, is we're going to sift in some flour into our mixture. Now, it's really, really important that you sift flour, because otherwise you're going to end up with lumps and air pockets in your mixture, and that's not really what we're aiming for. So, it's 180 grams of flour. I pre-measured it into this bowl, and what you want to do is just put it through the sieve. Now, I'm a very messy baker. I'm not very good at doing it clean, and I think that's fine. But if the best way is just to kind of hold your sieve over your bowl and just tap the sides. I'm sure many of you have already seen that, but it's the only way I end up without ending up with flour all over my kitchen, really. Just make sure you're getting any lumps through. And again, this isn't really a lot of flour for the amount of liquid we'll have in here, but it will help to bind together what we have. So again, taking your mixer of choice on a kind of low setting, combine this flour until it gives you that gorgeous silky mixture. This is one part of the recipe where you definitely will need to scrape down the sides again. And this seems like a very ambitious cake. You look at the pictures of this online, you think, oh, there's no way I could make something like that. The beauty of this is it takes no skill, no experience of baking. It really is just about following the recipe, and you will end up with something absolutely beautiful. What I really, really love about this is that we did this as part of our bake-along sessions at Lance, and a lot of people were first-time bakers, had never done it before, and they ended up with something that was a real treat. That was they really could, eat with their families, have as kind of like the big celebration cake at the end of a Sunday meal, for instance, and it's a great thing to do for that. So I'm just scraping down the sides, making sure all that flour is incorporated. You don't want to see any little pockets of flour in your mixture. You want that to kind of all be gone. So if you're seeing kind of like white powder in your mixture, you haven't done this for long enough. So just keep going until that's gone. Okay, so that's looking good. Again, I've already made a huge mess in my kitchen, but that's by the by and something that's going to happen as you're baking. So if you're using a paddle, just scrape that down, make sure the mixture's all inside. If you're using a hand mixer, similar thing. And as you assume, you might have seen how long it's taken me to do this. Obviously, if you're using a hand whisk yourself, it might take you a little bit longer, but that's fine. It will end up the same way. I'll try and show this to you. So just a kind of thick, light mixture there, very velvety, very smooth, a little bit shiny from all of the eggs. And what we're going to do is we're going to put that into this. And you might think, there's so much mixture, it's going to be too much for this cake tin. I assure you it's going to work out fine. During the process of baking, you might think it's a bit going to overflow. I assure you it won't, provided you've used the right size tin. But the recipe does call for you to, when you place it in the oven, place it on a baking tray. So even if the worst happened, you would be fine. You'll notice here that I'm using a metal spoon. That's really just because a metal spoon doesn't take as much air out of the mixture, which is obviously something we're trying to keep, because it will, what will help us kind of develop something that's beautiful and fluffy and exactly what you want from a kind of cheesecake. Again, don't be worried about the volume. I'm coming to the top of my cake tin now. I've not got all of it out, but I assure you it's kind of all part of the process and will work out fine. Ooh. So in the time that we've been preparing our mixture, our oven is preheated to 200 degrees pan. Again, 210 if you're using a conventional oven, for whatever reason. And essentially, the hot pot's done. This might seem very, very simple for something that's going to look, in an ideal situation, very elegant, very beautiful. So, as you can see, filled almost to the top with the mixture, and we've still got that ridge of baking parchment so that when it starts to rise in the oven, it's got something to climb up without necessarily overflowing. What you are aiming for there is at least 2 inches, so that it really doesn't overflow at all and it can just climb up that. So make sure you're kind of bearing that in mind when you're developing it. So then you want this in the middle of the oven for about an hour. Now again, you might worry that as it's going along it might be starting to burn. you are looking for this rich golden brown colour. If you Google Basque cheesecake online, you'll find that a lot of them look almost charcoal, or something similar to like a Portuguese custard tart, for instance. And that is because effectively that's going to supplant your crust. That's going to act as your crust. But when we take it out of the oven, which will be cutting to through the magic of editing in a moment, you're aiming for that crust to have developed, but when you shake the pan slightly, there's still to be this little jiggle in the middle. Now, it'll be really puffed up when it comes out of the oven, but it will naturally collapse in itself, and the surface will start to crack, and it will be, look like it's all going wrong. In a normal cheesecake situation, that would be the kind of sign that you'd cooked it too high, you'd not let it cool down in the oven before removing it. But we don't need to do that in this case. That's the beauty of this recipe. We are aiming for it to kind of fold in on itself, to create this beautiful ridged edge and this crack on top and the kind of burnt on the outside. So yes, breaking all the rules of cheesecake, but still giving you something delicious and wonderful. So I'll see you in about an hour when this is done. Hi, and we're back now 1 hour later with our cheesecake out of the oven. Now, if you've been following along, you will have also seen the development of, and I'll show you this, still very hot, this very dark golden brown crust. So what we want to do is we want to take it out of the oven, and it should be quite high, but because we've taken it out of like a very hot oven and put it into the cool air very, very quickly, what you'll start to see now is the cake collapse in on itself. Now, this is all part of it. It creates that wonderful folded over crust. You'll start to see cracks in the top where you should see. And really what you're looking for when you take it out of the oven is that dark, almost burnt crust. But also when you give it a little shake, you should be able to see like a perceptible jiggle in the middle of the cake. That shows you that the inside is still really nice and fluffy and that you've basically done a good job. So what you want to do here is essentially leave it in the tin for, I'd say, 10 to 15 minutes, just to let it cool slightly, but not completely. And then you're going to open your springform tin and leave it in the parchment paper until it's completely cooled. And then just peel the parchment paper back, and effectively you will have your Basque cheesecake. This is a recipe that has to stay in the fridge. Once it's cooled completely, it should just live in the fridge. And it can stay in there for about 5-6 days, maybe pushing it, covered with some cling film or beeswax paper or whatever you're using. And you can kind of intermittently just take it out. It's really nice to serve with cream, with mixed berries. And so I just wanted to say thank you for joining us today at the Diversity Project's annual event Bake-Along session. We would really, really appreciate everyone taking photos of the cakes that they develop, sharing them with the email address info@diversityproject.com. That's info@diversityproject.com. And then we'll create a collage of everyone who's taken part and share it across our social channels. And as always, it'd be great if you could also share that on. So thank you for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing what everyone bakes.